Minh Thúy xin kính chào quý vị hôm nay thứ Sáu, 23 tháng 8, 2024. Đến với VATV hôm nay gồm có phỏng vấn đặc biệt và nhạc lá bồ đề. Kính thưa quý vị, trong kỳ phỏng vấn lần này, Minh Thúy mời quý vị xem xét lại những câu hỏi sâu hơn có liên quan tới hồ sơ mật dân sự. Tại sao các nhân viên CIA lúc nào cũng đề cao vấn đề bảo mật? Nếu nhìn vào nguồn máy hoạt động của Mỹ ở Việt Nam ở một mức độ cao hơn, cách CIA giữ riêng những hồ sơ để có những hoạt động riêng phải chăng có hại? Lý do gì khiến họ không muốn chia sẻ các hồ sơ mật với Bộ Ngoại giao Mỹ hoặc là phái bộ quân viện Mỹ ở Việt Nam? Họ đã làm gì với khối hồ sơ mật đó? Những tiết lộ của họ ở phủ thủ tướng có những tác dụng gì? Nếu cũng được biết những tin tức trong các hồ sơ mật dân sự, liệu sứ quán Mỹ, phái bộ quân viện Mỹ hoặc là Việt Nam Cộng Hòa có thể hành động khác hay không? Ngoài những việc phải đối phó hoặc là giải quyết những vấn đề khi các cơ quan cần hợp tác với nhau, các cơ quan Mỹ hoạt động ở Việt Nam cũng có những tiếp xúc riêng với các ký giả trong những cuộc khui tin song phương. Trong đó, các ký giả tìm tới các nguồn tin ở bên trong chính phủ để tìm những tin tức bên trong chính phủ hoặc là quân đội để săn tin. Để tìm hiểu những suy nghĩ của các nhân viên Mỹ vào giữa và cuối thập niên 60, Minh Thúy mời quý vị tiếp tục theo dõi câu chuyện về hồ sơ mật dân sự của CIA và tiếp xúc của Frank Scotton với các ký giả Mỹ qua phần 13 phỏng vấn đặc biệt do Phan Lê Dũng, Võ Thành Nhân và Minh Thúy thực hiện.
Why was it that it's, I mean, I know that there are different organizations running from different heads inside South Vietnam. And the CIA is always very suspicious, should I call that? Or is that just their nature to keep the information within the organization instead of sharing it to other agencies? In there, how do you feel about their keeping everything to themselves?
Well, I understood that. I mean, I was not working within CIA, but I have friends in CIA, and some of the people I worked with on the outside had either CIA experience or maybe even, in the case of Bill Colby, future significant experience. But within their profession, sources. And it's not just the confidentiality of those sources, but it's protecting those sources from careless disclosure is really, I think, very important.
Yeah, that's quite understandable.
I think it becomes part of the character and nature of a man, and that's why when I would suggest not often, but maybe only a couple of occasions to Colby that he discuss the corruption files that were maintained in his office with the embassy. And I thought in particular two people that were receptive were because they wanted to know was Bunker, and then I thought of another person that Frank knows well, Ambassador Whitehouse. He became an ambassador later. Charlie Whitehouse was, I thought, sensitive to that and very bright, intelligent.
Well, there's no doubt the Foreign Service would like to know what's going on with the CIA. My question was over here, was it so hard to share this information that would prove beneficial to the overall effort?
I think it's just organizational. I mean, I think it's just, you might say, adult toilet training, or organizational.
Could there have been a better way of cooperation other than the thing that you've already?
Well, I think it goes all the way back to Washington. I mean, I think there had to be an understanding of, what are we trying to accomplish? What is our best estimate of probable success is there probable success? What must be done to do it? I was just increasingly convinced that it had to involve isolating the North from the South via a line across Laos. That if that weren't done, then nothing else would work. That was my...
How important do you judge to have that database? I mean, whether does it matter at all if you do not have those database, other than for performance and everything? Did it do a lot? Was the price pay off when you set up that database?
I think it could have made it. I think in some instances it made a difference. I think that Comer and then Colby were able to bring about the removal of a couple of people. It may have had something to do with the shift of Vinlop from 2 Corps. It may have had something to do with the removal of the corrupt province chief in Binh Dinh, who made so much money from the air base at Phuket and other things. But it was so closely held. I don't think that the embassy in general knew exactly what were in those files.
Could the foreign minister, could the foreign office done anything else with that information if they have had that?
Well, the key was the Prime Ministry. Could the American State Department have done anything different?
Yes.
I don't think so. I think you had to have somebody there on the ground who was committed to the notion of using information double, triple, quadruple checked to achieve ethical performance.
How receptive is the government of South Vietnam to when you reveal these a little bit of these database to them and telling them that those are the one really incompetent and needed to go?
Well, I was told I never wanted to go to those meetings at the Prime Ministry. My interest was beyond Saigon. I didn't want to do that, but I was told by Jean Savaggio, who for a time had a desk in the Prime Ministry, that when Colby would be there and he would raise the issue of competence or malfeasance in office by a low-ranking officer, usually district level or below, that the Prime Ministry would take it seriously and would act pretty quickly.
If it's lower level.
That's sure, right? Yeah, that was.
What happened when it's higher? The higher up it is, the less influence you have on it.
Well, again, I didn't want to get involved in that sticky flypaper, but I think that I think higher level instances, except possibly with respect to General Vinlop and his wife's cousin, I think it was cousin or nephew in Binh Dinh province, I don't think it was ever raised. So.
What about on the the media side? I haven't asked you any question about the media side. The Vietnamese always complain about the New Yorker and the Washington Post and the Chicago Tribune and Christian Monitor is doing a lot of damage to the certain government. Do you think their complaining was correct?
I don't know, because I didn't see many journalists at the time. I knew some of them.
Why? You don't have to know them personally, but the media at large, if you could look at it, did it do more damage, or it was helping to have the media in there?
Well, I think in the beginning, those few that I met in the period 63, 64, I think, were generally supportive
of the government,
of the U.S. assisting South Vietnam. I think that somewhere the next few years, the tide changed, the tide shifted, and I think there's a certain degree of self-interest there that, journalists will write what people write books they think will be published. People make movies that they think will make money. Some journalists wrote stories that they thought would get printed. Not everything that a journalist submitted would be printed. So I think there was some of that, but I didn't have much. I didn't have any responsibility for.
How do you feel personally, though? Let's say the Second Republic, because I think the first one there's virtually almost no media except the government, and all of the journalists was kind of expelled. At least that's the view that David Halberstam was writing about.
Well, some were expelled, but some seemed to do all right. I thought he was expelled. In fact, I thought Francois Sully of Newsweek was fairly well informed, but he was expelled, and then subsequently he was killed in the helicopter accident with Joe Cautrey. I must say I did not know many journalists. Yeah, I mean I did meet some occasionally, but.
Minh Thúy xin kính chào quý vị. Hôm nay thứ Sáu, 30 tháng 8, 2024. Đến với VATV hôm nay gồm có phỏng vấn đặc biệt và nhạc lá bồ đề. Kính thưa quý vị, rất nhiều người Việt và người Mỹ cho rằng giới truyền thông đã đóng một phần rất nặng vào việc để mất miền Nam Việt Nam. Đây đúng là sự thật hay chỉ là một cái cớ để đổ lỗi cho chính phủ Việt Nam và chính phủ Mỹ? Các ký giả có thực sự viết những điều họ chứng kiến hay không? Ảnh hưởng của các bài viết của họ đối với nguồn máy dân sự và quân sự ra sao? Nhìn trên phương diện chính trị, cũng có rất nhiều người Việt và người Mỹ cho rằng cuộc đổ bộ năm 1965 của Mỹ là một cách can thiệp sai lầm. Mỹ có nên can thiệp hay không? Có nên đổ bộ ồ ạt như đã làm năm 1965 hay không? Có cách can thiệp thực tiễn nào khác hay không? Hiệp định Ba Lê là một hiệp định cho phép Mỹ rút quân và bắt Việt đóng quân ở miền Nam Việt Nam. Thế giới đã hy vọng Hiệp định Ba Lê sẽ đem lại hòa bình cho Việt Nam, trong khi những người miền Nam hiểu rõ mọi sự đã nói rằng đó là Hiệp định khai tử miền Nam. Vào những giờ phút cuối Hiệp định Ba Lê đã được soạn thảo như thế nào? Thực thi như thế nào? Minh Thúy mời quý vị theo dõi phần 13, cũng là phỏng vấn cuối cùng để nhìn lại mọi sự qua cái nhìn và sự suy nghĩ của ông Frank Scotton đối với tất cả những điểm vừa nêu để thấy rõ hơn bối cảnh Việt Nam Cộng Hòa ngay trong thời điểm Hoa Kỳ đang rút khỏi miền Nam Việt Nam qua Hiệp định Ba Lê. Chương trình do Phan Lê Dũng, Võ Thành Nhân và Minh Thúy thực hiện.
But did you feel the accusation? Some of them feel like a large part of losing Vietnam was because of the media. The media was on the left, leftist, pro-communist, and saying all that.
I think if they'd all written negative stories, but we'd done the right things, I think we would have won. See? I mean, they wrote some negative stories, but we did a lot of wrong things that didn't work. I like Peter Arnett. When you grind out stories to the extent that Peter had to, there'll be some inevitable errors in some of them. But there were a lot of errors in McVie reports, in Juspow reports, in probably Cord's reports, in CIA reports. I mean, everybody who authors material makes mistakes, I think. But I think the journalists, for the most part, did okay. When a baseball team loses, everybody points a finger and says, it's because you made an error at first base. It's because you didn't get that fly ball, you know. But everybody will point fingers. But if we had done the right things, tactically and strategically, then, first of all, the journalists would have written much more positive stories. You know, secondly, how the war was covered would have been irrelevant, you know, when you win a war.
Exactly.
See? And we didn't do the things that we ought to have that might have enabled us to win.
By 1965, when you Americanized the war, do you think that's a little bit too late by then? Should America have intervened earlier? Or do you think it's should not intervene at all? Or what's the question on that?
Well, again, I go back to the notion that I had, is that you isolate the North from the South. In theory, politically, by international relations, that is what some thought that the Geneva Accords would do.
Thought.
Yeah, thought. You know, erroneously, dream-like, but if that was not going to be done by international agreement at Geneva, then I'm not talking about the Paris Accords, but the 1955 Geneva Accords, then it should have been done militarily. You know, if it was important enough to commit American forces to South Vietnam, then it should have been important enough to do it at the most pivotal point, strategically speaking, and that would have been Lao Bao to Savannah Khet. I think,
but you don't think that the intervention could have been earlier?
Well, where would the intervention have been?
I would say the point of 1965, when they have a lot of Americans come in militarily into the country, that's the, one would say that's the starting point of the Americanization of the war.
I think the important question is not when it would be done, but how it would have been done. And again, I think the key, I didn't see it clearly myself in 64 and 65. But by 66, I was seeing clearly that, you know, if we don't isolate the South from the North, in actuality, as theoretically it was supposed to have been done, then we're not going to make it.
Now we come to the Paris Agreement. Some say that it's the best you could do. Some say it's the worst you could do. What's your judgment on that?
Well, Frank and I spoke to this last spring at the conference in Texas. I think it was sloppily done. I think that Dr. Kissinger was so eager to arrive at some agreement and divorce himself and President Nixon from the war that he overlooked problems within the agreement. And you know, just to get into the fine details on it, as an indicator, I think, of his sloppiness, the final text of the agreement was not transmitted to the American embassy. Instead, when I prepared a booklet that would be used for the Joint Military Commission, I had to use the text as it was broadcast from Hanoi, rather than that which was transmitted from Paris to the American embassy in Saigon, because they didn't send the last minute changes.
Yeah.
You know, secondly, in terms of guidance to the field, they didn't pay any attention to the release of American prisoners in the South. Everybody's attention was on the American prisoners who would be released in Hanoi. But there were 23 that were released in the South. And when I went in there on that recovery effort, I found that the other side was assuming that on the same day American prisoners would be released, some of their people would be flown in, and some South Vietnamese soldiers would be flown out. An erroneous assumption, but there was nothing on paper to control what would happen. So it wound up being a bit of a snarl, and it could have been worse than that.
Mm-hmm. Well, for every project there are hiccups. And
well,
could you say those are just hiccups?
The main
point.
Potentially fatal. The American general, for example, was saying to me at one point, "Well, we'll just go back to Saigon." Okay, you had hundreds and hundreds of South Vietnam prisoners waiting to be flown out in blue pajamas. You had the 23 Americans there. I mean, you could have had suicides, or if we had just gotten in the helicopters and flown away, as that general had suggested, then I'm sure the communists would have said, "See, they don't care about you. They're going back." So all those those kind of fine points have to be detailed, and there were some other things in the Paris Agreement also that just weren't nailed down very, very tightly. So I think that it was a scandalous agreement. And again, if we had done the right things at the right time, it would not have happened.
Okay. Yes, I think I understand at least that part of it a little bit more now.
Yeah.
And then I would probably interview you some more in the future, but I think I will let you rest now and take a break.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, well, yeah, I'm still a young fellow, 85. There will be a future.
Thank you. I feel like I'm the congressman today, and I have two of the very high officials to brief me. That's the feeling I have. That's the feeling that I had, dreamt about for a long, long time.